Happy New Year! It is officially January 2024. That means it is time yet again for me to look back on 2023 and reflect on the new book releases I read. I feel like I had a great reading year in 2023. I read about 50 books, and 15 of them were new releases. And it wasn't just a great year because of the number of books I read, the quantity, but no, it was a great quality of books I read this year. So I'm going to give you the list of all the 2023 new book releases that I read, ranked from worst to best, my least favorite to my favorite. Out of these 15 books, I have 6 books that I think are great, that I highly recommend, and my number 1 book is one of my new personal favorites, so stick around to the end to hear that recommendation. But we are not starting with the great books. I need to start at the bottom with the category of the bad books. I just have one new release I read this year that I would call bad. So at number 15, it is a book called, like literally, dude, Arguing for the Good in Bad English by Valerie Friedland. To argue for their validity, linguist Valerie Friedland dives into the history and meaning of some of the language habits that a lot of people consider their pet peeves. Things like fillers, and overuse of like, dude, ing being reduced to in apostrophe, misuse of literally, vocal fry, and singular they. These are not pet peeves of mine, personally. You will hear me using a lot of these in my videos here on YouTube. So I like what the author aims to do in this book. However, she does not achieve it. To me, it seems like a rhetorical failure. I can't imagine this book hitting any audience in the right way. Maybe this book could be used as an undergraduate introduction to sociolinguistics. Even then, I imagine young students would find the voice and style a bit silly in a bad way. So that's the one new release I would call bad, but we are not at the good books yet. My next category is the books that were just all right. At number 14, it's a book called The War of Words: How America's GI Journalists Battled Censorship and Propaganda to Help Win World War II by Molly Guptill Manning. World War II is an interesting and important time in U.S. history, and of course, world history. I thought this book would be an intriguing, unread chapter of this time, but the book doesn't offer a lot that's new, and it doesn't really do the heavy topic the justice it deserves. My favorite part was reading the poetry written by the American soldiers. I wish I could just read a collection of the writing and the artwork by the soldiers of this time, the primary source material itself. Number 13 on my list is called The Conspiracy Tourist by Dom Joly. This British comedian travels the world to explore famous conspiracy theories. He more so makes fun of them and the people who believe in them. It's not an academic nonfiction book. It's a fun, silly travel comedy. It takes him to places like the Denver International Airport, aliens in New Mexico, lots of conspiracies in Texas, like theories about the JFK assassination, QAnon, Alex Jones in general, etc. It takes him to Camelot Castle and the court of King Arthur, and Flat Earth. The first theory he explores was very interesting to me because I had never heard of it before. The theory that Finland does not exist. You heard me right. The whole country of Finland does not exist. It was made up by Russia and Japan so that they could be the only ones to fish in the water that is there, where you think there would be land. No country there. Number 12 on my list is No Estoy Roto, or I'm Not Broken, by Jesse Leon. To quote the synopsis of this book, in this unflinching and inspiring memoir, Jesse Leon tells an extraordinary story of resilience and survival, shining a light on a childhood spent devastated by sex trafficking, street life, and substance abuse. Despite all his hardships, Leon went on to graduate from UC Berkeley and Harvard. This memoir is available both in Spanish and English. I listened to the audiobook in Spanish, read by the author himself. It was good listening practice for me because it is written and read in a Spanish that is familiar to me, the Spanish that moves across the border from the north of Mexico to Southern California. It's also well read, well performed, and engaging. It's a long book, but it did leave me wanting more at the end. I want to hear more of the happy, hopeful, uplifting part of his life, especially after slogging through all the horrible, unfortunate, depressing things he had to go through. I want to hear more about how he, got through Berkeley and Harvard and how he's doing now. Number 11 on my list is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. This British writer's latest novel is her first foray into historical fiction. It's an interesting concept, but in execution, it turned out to be one of my least favorite novels from one of my favorite writers. And I already put out a Zadie Smith ranking video and a review of The Fraud, so check out those videos to hear more of my thoughts on this one. After that, we are moving into the top 10 and the books that I consider good books. So we're not at the great ones yet, but the books in this next category I would generally recommend to people. Maybe I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend them, but if you're interested in these specific topics, you might like these books. Number 10 is The Cat Who Taught Zen by James Norbury. It's a cute story. It does come across as didactic in a pedantic way. By that, I mean the cat hears a story or tells a story, then explains exactly what the lesson is supposed to be, and what the reader should take away from the story and the lesson. So that ruins the fun of interpreting the story for yourself. It makes the story and the plot just all right. However, the illustrations included by the author himself are great. They add a lot to the story, and it's very cute overall. So I would say it's a good book. Number 9 is a short little book, a novella called Fumes by William Dozier. This is an interesting little book. There's lots of characterization and scene setting in few words. It is engaging and surprisingly violent. I don't want to give too much away, so I will carefully read the description of it on the back. Charlie Whitler, sober for the first time in his adult life, returns to Durham County, North Carolina. Only his maternal grandfather knows why he's home. The Hammonds, a once wealthy family in decline, regroup in the Outer Banks as the story rushes towards its blunt and eerie conclusion. You don't need to watch William Dozier's reading recommendation videos here on YouTube to know that he likes Cormac McCarthy. You can read the inspiration on the pages of this novella. So if you like McCarthy, this one's worth a read. And this is a new author to keep your eyes on. I look forward to reading a full-length novel from this guy. Those ones were the good books. Now I'm moving into the next category, the damn good books. These ones I recommend a little more highly. I will be more likely to tell a friend about these following books. Number 8 on my list is The Longest Race. Inside the secret world of abuse, doping, and deception on a Nike's elite running team. This one is by Kara Goucher, featuring Mary Pylon. Despite the team's success in the public eye, Goucher has recently raised her voice to reveal the darkness behind Nike's elite running team. The Longest Race shows how Nike's project misunderstood what's really important about the sport of running, building community, fostering healthy competition, persisting in life with athletics as natural long-term motivation. That's what should be important about running. Through this telling memoir, the journalist Mary Pylon helps Goucher to expose Nike's pattern of unhealthy coaching, tricky ways to avoid anti-doping laws, and even sexual abuse of their athletes. It's a story about the necessary bravery it takes to raise your voice against unjust power that it seems impossible to defeat. The Longest Race reaffirms what I think is beautiful about the sport of running. Hopefully this book being published inspires the sport overall to move in a more positive direction. Number 7 on my list is a book called The Teachers A Year Inside America's Most Vulnerable, Important Profession by Alexandra Robbins. Can you survive a full school year in the shoes of a teacher? Read this book and find out. Alexandra Robbins goes behind the scenes to tell the true, sometimes shocking, always inspirational stories of 3 teachers as they navigate a year in the classroom. She follows Penny, a Southern middle school math teacher who grappled with a toxic staff clique at the beginning of school, Miguel, a special ed teacher in the Western United States who fought for his students both as an educator and as an activist, and Rebecca, an East Coast elementary school teacher who struggled to schedule and define a life outside of school. As a teacher myself, I could relate to a lot of stories told in this book. I could sigh or tighten my lips and nod to a lot of the statistics listed in the book. But I also learned some things about teachers who teach K through 12 at traditional schools, public schools, that is. Because I do technically teach at the high school level, but it's a non-traditional adult charter school. And I'll just say I'm glad I don't have to deal with my students' parents. My students are the parents. Okay, we are at number 6 on my list, and that means we are moving into the category of the great books. These are books that I would recommend to pretty much anyone. I don't care what you like. These are great books. And number 6 is a book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Dacher Keltner. Dacher Keltner is a psychologist and professor at UC Berkeley. He was a consultant on my favorite Disney Pixar movie, Inside Out. That's the one where the young girl's emotions are personified. Emotions like joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. In this new nonfiction book, Keltner explores an understudied emotion that he argues should be considered its own distinct character, or its own distinct emotion that could be a character in Inside Out. That emotion is awe. Awe didn't make it in the cut for Inside Out 1, but I hear they're coming out with a sequel to Inside Out. Maybe Awe will be in the sequel. I was thinking Owen Wilson would be a good voice actor to portray awe, because awe is the emotion that makes you say, wow. Awe is about experiencing vastness. It's seeing the view from the top of a mountain. It's realizing how huge the universe is and maybe how small we are. It's the shared euphoria in the crowd of a concert. Sometimes it might involve joy. Sometimes it might involve fear. So in that way, it's also its own unique emotion, and Keltner makes a great argument to support that in this book. Moving into the top 5, number 5 on my list is a book called My Dog Just Speaks Spanish by Andrea Caceros. Does your dog understand commands that you give them? What if you gave those same commands in a different language? Well, that's what this kid's book, full of beautiful pictures, is about. The main character, Aurora, moves to the United States with her dog, Nena. Aurora's first language is Spanish, so naturally she gives all her commands to her dog in Spanish. So as she herself is trying to learn English to adjust to life in the U.S., she's also trying to teach her dog English so that he can understand different commands. It's a cute, funny idea for a story, taking your dog to the park and your dog doesn't understand the English commands like catch that the other people are saying to their dogs. This book is a cute bilingual story that is fun for the whole family. The drawings have a lot going on and there's some fun little details to catch. So I think this one will be fun to read and reread. Number 4 on my list is called The Power of Language: How the Codes We Use to Think, Speak, and Live Transform Our Minds. This one is by Viorica Marian. Here is the linguistics book that you should read. Dr. Viorica Marian wrote this wonderfully researched, compiled, and presented argument for the many benefits of being able to use more than one language. Also, she wrote this book in her 3rd language. Romanian is her first language, Russian is her second, and she uses her 3rd, English, deftly and precisely to write this book. This one is a lot more heavy on the research and hard science because this is not a sociolinguistics book. This is a book about the brain, cognitive linguistics, and psychology. And it's great. Number 3 on my list is a collection of poetry called Dharma Talk. These poems are by John Brehm. This collection of simple, easy-to-read poems finds the Zen in everyday life. In romantic moments, frustrated moments, even boring, mundane moments, there are Zen lessons to be found just if we pay attention. Number 2 on my list is also a collection of poetry. This one is called La Furia by Maria Sotomayor. I wanted to practice reading Spanish this year, and to me, poetry is always a great place to practice reading and understanding a language. So I had never heard of this poet before, who is from Spain, but I picked up a new collection of poetry in Spanish, just one that I thought seemed interesting to me. And I'll be honest, on the first few pages of this book, I did not like it at all, and I was actually frustrated because this book starts with a preface that's written out like prose, but there's no punctuation, no periods between sentences, no commas to be found. This was frustrating to me because Spanish is not my first language, and I thought, why are you writing like this? This is so difficult to understand. But after I made it through the preface and the poem start, I found that it's the same language from the preface, spread it out across the pages of the book, and then they do have punctuation, and they're also structured in interesting ways like poems. So I had more time to start understanding them throughout the collection, and I got more meaning from them, and I ended up finding a lot of poems that I really loved. Then it ends with a little bit more prose at the end, which does have punctuation, where the poet talks about how poetry is not about the writer, the poet, explaining meaning to the reader, telling you what to think or how to interpret it. She talks about how poetry is a code, almost like a puzzle, and it's up to the reader to make meaning of it in their own way. By the end of this book, this collection of poetry became one of the most valuable things that I read in 2023. Now we are to my number 1 pick, the greatest new release that I read in 2023. This one actually is a new all-time favorite book of mine in the category of books that I consider perfect, 10 out of 10, as great a book as it can get. And I'm talking about a novel called Where There Was Fire by John Manuel Arias. This novel makes magical realism feel more real than ever before. It has some supernatural elements, but it's very grounded in realism, which I love because it also reads like historical fiction. In Where There Was Fire, the romances and tragedies of 5 generations of the Cepeda Valverde family are grounded in historical fiction, but elevated by literary flair. All tying back to one night where there was a deadly fire at a Costa Rican banana plantation in 1968. Secrets are slowly peeled back over time, from the layer of the family to the geopolitical layer, connecting the U.S. to Costa Rica via the American Fruit Company. Every piece of description is poetry. Every episode in the unraveling of this plot feels like a personal truth revealing itself in a dream. I can't say enough good things about this great novel, Where There Was Fire. One of my new favorites. I highly recommend to anyone. So that is my list. Those are all 15 new releases that I read in 2023. From my least favorite to my favorite. Obviously, a lot more new books come out every year than just 15 of them. I had other books on my radar that I didn't have time to get around to. So please comment below, what was your favorite book of 2023? I'm sure there are some great ones that I missed, and I would love to have some recommendations that I can read in 2024. And as always, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the next book that you read in the new year. Bye.